There's a lot of water in this bathtub.
There's so much water in this bathtub, Chip Walton.
What's going on, everybody? We are in the bathroom of Don Osborne.
We sure are.
We're in the shower with about a 1/4 inch of water on
together.
Our socks. Don't ask why. It's the most quiet room in the house at the moment. And I brought Michael in to taste his own recipe of the Ryed Irish Stout, brewed by me in early March. It's supposed to be for St. Patrick's Day.
Happy belated St. Patrick's Day, Chip.
Yeah, man.
Sláinte.
And I just want to get your take on it, and if people should make it next St. Patrick's Day, say in February 2020.
Do whatever you did. That's ambrosial.
Ambrosial indeed, but before we get into the tasting notes, I want to take you back to show you how the beer was brewed. This recipe rewind is brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast, whose Kvike blend is now available as a limited edition summer seasonal release, and the awesomeness of our Patreon supporters. Join them in supporting the show at patreon.com/chopandbrew. The recipe for my Ryed Irish Stout comes from Michael Dawson's MASHMAKER book. As explained in the book, you're supposed to dog-ear this recipe for February to plan ahead for St. Patrick's Day to put a New World twist on an Old World classic. We're basically talking about a dry stout. Think Guinness or Murphy's, something perfect for St. Patrick's Day or any time of the year if you're a stout fan, but with a little twist using flaked rye instead of flaked barley in the grain bill. Dawson explains that with this beer, the aromas and flavors of the 1-2 punch of roasty and bitter, but with the soothing, creamy texture will all be intact, but the rye will add a new dimension, a little more earthiness. He says to think pumpernickel bread and a hint of wintergreen and herbal spice underneath. The malt bill is pretty simple. It's 6.5 pounds of MCI Irish Stout malt, or any nice UK pale malt, he says, but I used MCI Irish Stout malt. 1.75 pounds of flaked rye, and 1.5 pounds of roasted barley. These malts were all mashed brew in a bag style on top of my stove. I used my 8-gallon kettle. As you can see, I had to use both burners in order to get the water up because it's such a huge kettle on the stove top. I discovered that it was pretty easy to mash in if you clamp the bag to the sides. That way it doesn't slip in. So I put my clamps on. I mash in the stout malt, the flaked rye, the barley. I actually add some rice hulls. I think this is more if you're doing a mash tun version of this versus a brew in a bag, but I was like, hey, why not? It's supposed to kind of help create some porousness so you don't get a stuck mash. That didn't actually help, as you'll see as we come up. I mashed in. I got all the grains in, well incorporated, stirred it up, got the dough balls out, and I was aiming for a mash temp of 151 to 153, at least according to Dawson's suggestion. About 150. Gonna heat up some water over here. Dawson calls for 151 to 153, so I have a little kettle over here of water that's at about 190 that I'm just kind of gonna dose in a little bit at a time and see if I can't get it closer to like 153, 154, because in this brew in a bag setup we always lose a couple of degrees just because it's not the thickest mash. Granted, this is more thicker than usual, but my house is kind of chilly. It's a big Italian kettle, thin-walled. We're going to lose a couple of degrees just about no matter what you do. So I want to prepare for that and get it a little higher so that when it falls down, it's in the range. 151, 152. Oh, I need more hands, y'all. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna say let's go for 154 or 5. Granted, this is making the mash even thinner, but I really want to hit that temperature for a change. A lot of time my beers kind of dip 2 or 3, 4 degrees during the course of the mash when I'm doing this brew in a bag. So that's kind of what I'm working on, is trying to figure out a way to get a little thicker mash, maybe not a full volume, and then we'll dilute it afterwards if need be. 152, almost 153. Keep dosing it up. This should get us there. And I also don't want to make this any thinner. It's pretty thin now. We're about 5, maybe 5 1/4 for only like 9 pounds of malt, 9 3/4, something like that. Something like that, man. It's not highly scientific here in Chop and Brew headquarters, as you all know. So that's right at about 154. I'm gonna let that ride because I'm about to be cooking some soup over on these other burners. This microwave light is actually pretty hot, so I think we're gonna be able to keep temp above 151 at this point. So we're gonna cover it back up. Mash on, mashers. Woo! That's some dark work. It dropped to 145, but it's been 90 minutes. I feel good about it. That's what happens when you start cooking dinner. Time to get your brew on. After this 90-minute mash, lifting this swollen sack of grain out of the kettle was a much bigger deal than I had anticipated. Oh my god, that's heavy. Holy crap. That is a lot of something. So I called in some backup. Elsa, can you do me a big favor? I'm going to lift this bag up. Can you put this grill grate underneath it?
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Woo! Man, that is no joke. Man, this is not draining. You can tell that flaked rye is holding on to the liquid because, yeah, you look at all that. There's a lot of liquid in here. It's going to take a long time to get that out. Getting all the wort out of this bag took some patience, poking, pushing with a wooden spoon, hot hand, squeezing it, even twisting the bag and squeezing it in order to get as much wort as I could out of this super saturated and gummy mash that was stuck in the bag. So in the end, I had to move it to the smaller kettle because I just wanted it to be easier to deal with. It's about 4 gallons, it looks like. There's plenty left behind in that bag, but it's so clouded and congested because of the rye that I'm not going to mess with it. You can see we got a beautiful black stout wort here. The bricks right now, it looks like about 16. So we got plenty high. I think there's going to be plenty of gravity by the time we're done boiling to dilute it even more. I'm not anal about the 5 gallons. I just want to make sure I hit the OG that Dawson suggests for the beer, but that color is beautiful. Tastes like rich brownies and a little bit of coffee, chocolate, slightest bit of vanilla for some reason, just a light little marshmallowy kind of vanilla. Tastes really good, really rich. I'm looking really forward to hitting it with some hops. The recipe calls for 1 ounce of North Down hops at 60. For some reason, I just decided why not. I did 0.75 at top of boil, and I put a 1/4 ounce in closer to flame out, about 5 minutes in. In Dawson's recipe, he calls for an English or American ale strain with a clean profile with attenuation. In this case, I specifically used Imperial Yeast Darkness strain, which has been awesome in the past for porters and stouts for me, so I went with it. I believe it's the yeast from Guinness, so it makes a lot of sense in a beer like this. Back to the shower to find out what Dawson thought of the beer.
That's really nice. You get the rye flavor, tons of roast, a little. What was the yeast that you used on this?
This is Darkness from Imperial.
Okay. There's just like a hint of like dark berry type fruit from the yeast, I think. Yeah, it's just super nice. It drinks like a nice dry Irish stout because it's got that velvety texture and the roasty quality, but then you get that snap of rye, that spicy, earthy, kind of almost a tangy flavor, whereas like flaked barley in a traditional stout is just so kind of like even keeled and just generically grainy. This is a little more expressive.
Is that what the concept was here? Mm-hmm. Guinness Plus?
Guinness Plus, Guinness Rye. Rye Stout, Ryed Irish Stout.
Now that we taste it, we've had plenty of other beers tonight to influence my palate.
Very all lagers though.
But all of a sudden,
this is the first ale.
Yeah, and I'm getting like something almost like barrel-y, like rum barrel aged out of this. And maybe it's because it's possibly the sweetest thing we've had all night.
It's
even
definitely
the sweet
the
lagers
highest,
have been like really clean
and dry too, like really attenuated. I bet this is like a higher final gravity.
I'm not sure offhand. Don't put me on the spot.
Okay,
but probably more than what we've had
if
tonight.
nothing else, like it's got like a lot more mouthfeel and texture from that flaked raw grain.
Yeah, I did a brew in a
Yeah.
bag, and it was the first brew in a bag I've ever done that did not want to like let go of the liquid. Like I had to squeeze, I had to like kind of like get it in this chokehold because it just wanted to be this like, ugh, we're sitting on top of this pot on a grill grate.
Show me how you hug the grain.
I was like, squeeze it out.
We're hugging in a shower.
But it was the first time ever that I was like, I think this has got to be because of the flake rye. It just did. I pulled it out, and it might as well have just been like mud in a bag.
Yeah.
It did not want to actually like drain like most brew in a bags.
That's got to be the rye. I never did it as a brew in a bag, but I could see that. This would take a lot of kind of aftermarket modifications really well. You mentioned barrels. Like I could see like some whiskey or rum expression going really well in this. Coconut.
But it's also just good, right? Just
It's pretty damn smashable the way it is.
brew it in early February, carbonate it, save it for mid-March.
Why limit it to just one holiday a year though? Like
Well, you've made that point several times.
you could have this for Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Irish. You could have it for Cinco de July. Man, nice work, Chip.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, you suggested using something a little less Irish, continental, but I went in. Darkness is the Guinness yeast, so I was like, all right, I'm going to sneak this in.
It works.
I like that idea of post-modification if that's what you want to do with it. Mm-hmm. It could almost have some cherries in it. It could have some...
Yeah, fruit. That's a good idea, too. Huh. That's a lot to think about in a bathroom.
With water on our socks.
My feet are so wet, dude.
At this point, I now have to figure out a different strategy for getting home in my shoes.
We're gonna have to walk around Don's house barefoot after this. This is gonna be weird. We've been in here a long time together, too. What's everybody saying?
So the recipe is online and in Michael Dawson's MASHMAKER.
MASHMAKERbook.com.
I think you should make it year-round, but you should definitely schedule it like Paul Fowler would on your calendar a year in advance.
He's such a responsible boy. You should all try to be like him.
To brew in early February and break it out for your home people in mid-March.
Home persons.
St. Dawson's Day.
Cilantro.
Let's find a towel to wipe our feet off.
There's one right there.
I'm just gonna take these socks off at this point.
Dude, we totally...
This is real. Y'all want to know what happens behind the scenes? People get wet feet.
We dropped the soap.
Oh, that's a good recipe, Michael Dawson.
Thanks, man. I don't know where this goes. Right there. Master Chip Walton. Hey, buddy. So nice to finally have you alone. Are we rolling?
It's a little cookie.
Should have been
I
rolling.
like that there's a towel.
There's gotta be a towel. That's how you keep nice and dry.
That won't even make the blooper reel. That'll make the Christmas blooper reel.
For Patreons. That's some pretty high-end design for,
Yeah.
huh. Interesting. Marketing's a fascinating science.
Hugs in the shower.